Trevor Walsh's salvage ship drifted through the debris field like a scavenger bird picking through bones. The wreckage of an old transport freighter floated in chunks around him, twisted metal catching the distant starlight. He had been out here for 3 weeks, collecting scrap to sell at the frontier stations. It was lonely work, but Trevor preferred it that way. After losing his medical unit in the war, he found that empty space asked fewer questions than people did. His scanner beeped. Trevor glanced at the display and frowned. A distress beacon, faint and irregular, pulsed from somewhere deeper in the debris field. He leaned forward in his seat, adjusting the scanner's range. The signal was weak, like something running on its last bit of power. Probably another dead battery on a gutted hull, he thought. But something made him change course anyway. As Trevor maneuvered his ship closer, the beacon grew stronger. His computer tried to decode the signal and failed. The language wasn't in the standard galactic database. Trevor felt a chill run down his spine. Unauthorized languages were rare, usually belonging to isolationist species that didn't want outsiders understanding their communications. Getting involved with those types could mean serious trouble. He should have turned around right then. Trevor knew that. But the beacon kept pulsing, and despite everything, he was still a medic at heart. Someone was out there, maybe dying, and he couldn't just fly away. The escape pod came into view, small and sleek with strange markings carved into its hull. Trevor brought his ship alongside and extended the docking clamp. The pod systems were completely dead except for that failing beacon. He suited up, checked his medical kit out of habit, and cycled through the airlock. The pod's hatch was already damaged, making it easy to pry open. Trevor's headlamp cut through the darkness inside and he froze. A woman lay crumpled against the far wall, her body twisted at an awkward angle. But she wasn't human. Her skin had a pale blue tint, and her features were sharp and angular in a way no human face could be. Dark stains covered her clothing, and Trevor's medic training kicked in before his common sense could stop him. He pulled her carefully into his ship, noting the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Still alive barely. As he laid her on his medical table, Trevor saw the scars. They covered her arms and neck in deliberate patterns, too precise to be accidental injuries. Someone had carved these marks into her skin on purpose. The wounds that were killing her looked infected, angry and swollen, refusing to heal properly. Trevor's computer finally identified her species. Kethran. His blood ran cold. The Kethran were known throughout the galaxy for their extreme isolationism and rigid social structure. They didn't allow outsiders into their space, and they certainly didn't appreciate outsiders interfering with their people. The scars on her body matched descriptions Trevor had heard whispered in station bars. Exile marks. The Kethran did this to their own people before casting them out to die. He should have put her back in the pod. Should have left her where he found her and forgotten this ever happened. Harboring a Kethran exile could trigger a diplomatic nightmare. The Kethran might even consider it an act of war. But Trevor looked at the dying woman on his table and saw only a patient who needed help. His hands moved automatically, years of training taking over. He cleaned the infected wounds as carefully as he could, noting that her biology was different enough from human that standard antibiotics might not work. Her blood was darker than his, almost purple, and her heart rate was too slow. Trevor worked through the night, mixing treatments and hoping something would stabilize her. His ship's AI kept warning him about Kethran patrol vessels in the nearby sectors. He ignored the warnings. The woman's breathing grew more labored as the hours passed. Twice her heart stopped, and twice Trevor shocked it back into rhythm with equipment meant for human patients. By dawn cycle, he had managed to stop the worst of the infections. Her vital signs remained weak but steady. Trevor slumped in his chair, exhausted, and stared at his unconscious patient. What was he supposed to do now? He couldn't take her to a station. The moment anyone identified her as Kethran, questions would start. Questions he couldn't answer without admitting he'd interfered with an execution. The woman stirred on the third day. Trevor had been checking her bandages when her eyes snapped open. They were gold, bright and terrified, fixing on him with the intensity of a cornered animal. She tried to move to get away from him, but her body was too weak. A sound came from her throat, sharp and harsh. Words in a language Trevor didn't understand. He raised his hands slowly, trying to look non-threatening. The universal gesture for peace. But she only looked more frightened, her gold eyes darting around the medical bay as if searching for escape routes. Trevor's translation device struggled with her language, picking up fragments. Contaminated and unclean, and why? She kept repeating that last word. Why? Why was he doing this? Trevor wished he had a good answer. He settled for the simple truth, even though his translator probably mangled it. "You were dying. I'm a medic. I help people." The woman stared at him as if he had said something impossible. Her hand moved to the scars on her arm, touching them through the bandages. She spoke again, slower this time, and the translator caught more of it. "My people marked me, left me. I am worthless." Trevor felt anger flare in his chest. Nobody's worthless. She didn't seem to understand. Her species had literally carved into her skin that she had no value, then left her to die in space. And now a stranger from a species she probably considered primitive had saved her life. Trevor could see the confusion in her golden eyes, the complete inability to process what was happening. His ship's AI chimed a warning. Kethran vessels, 3 of them, had entered the debris field. They were scanning for something. Trevor's heart hammered as he killed his ship's exterior lights and powered down to minimum systems. The woman on the table tensed, hearing the alarm in the AI's voice even if she couldn't understand the words. They sat in darkness and silence as the Kethran patrol ships swept through the area. Trevor watched their patterns on his dim display, hardly breathing. The woman watched him, those gold eyes never leaving his face. After what felt like hours, the patrol ships moved on to the next sector. Trevor let out a shaky breath and powered his systems back up. When he looked at his patient again, she was still staring at him with that same confused, frightened expression. She spoke one word that the translator caught perfectly. "Why?" Trevor pulled a blanket over her and adjusted the medical monitors. He didn't have a better answer than before, but he tried anyway. "Because leaving people to die isn't something humans do. Not if we can help it." The woman's eyes closed slowly, exhaustion pulling her back towards sleep. But Trevor saw something in her face before unconsciousness claimed her again. Not understanding, not yet. But maybe the first tiny seed of hope that somewhere in this vast galaxy, mercy still existed. Selira woke on the 4th day with clarity for the first time since her exile. The fog of infection had lifted from her mind, and she could finally think clearly. She sat up slowly on the medical table, testing her limbs. The human had bandaged her wounds with surprising skill. The pain had dulled to a manageable ache. The human sat at a console across the small room, his back to her. Selira studied him carefully. He was smaller than most Kethran males, with brown skin and dark hair cut short. His species was considered primitive by galactic standards, barely worthy of trade agreements. Yet this primitive had saved her life when her own advanced people had sentenced her to death. She didn't understand it. The confusion made her angry. Selira swung her legs off the table and stood. Her muscles protested, but she forced herself to walk toward the door. She needed to leave this ship, to get away from this human who had disrupted the natural order of things. She had been marked as contaminated. She was supposed to die. That was the law. The door wouldn't open. Selira pulled at it, her frustration growing. Behind her, the human spoke. "You're not a prisoner. The door's locked because we're in deep space. Open it now and you'll get sucked out." His translation device mangled the words, but Selira understood enough. She turned to face him, her hands clenched into fists. "Why did you save me? I am marked. I am unclean. My people cast me out for good reason." Trevor stood and walked closer but kept a respectful distance. "What reason?" "I question the order." Selira touched the scars on her arm, feeling the raised patterns under her fingertips. "I suggested that the lower caste deserved better treatment. I showed compassion for those beneath me. This is a sickness in Kethran society. A mental defect that must be removed." She watched the human's face, waiting for understanding. Instead, she saw something that looked like anger. "That's not a sickness," Trevor said quietly. "That's called being decent." Selira felt dizzy. "You don't understand. The order must be maintained. Those born to lower castes accept their place. To question this creates chaos. I was contaminated by weak thoughts. I deserved exile. Nobody deserves to die for being kind." The words hit Selira like a physical blow. She had spent weeks in that escape pod, dying slowly, telling herself that the council was right. That she was defective. That her death would protect the purity of Kethran society. But this human spoke with such certainty, as if compassion was something valuable rather than dangerous. Trevor moved to a small kitchen area and began preparing food. "Sit down before you fall down. You're still recovering." Selira wanted to refuse, but her legs were shaking. She sat at the small table and watched the human work. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "I am nothing to you. Helping me gains you nothing and risks much. The Kethran will hunt for me." Trevor set a bowl of something warm in front of her. "Some kind of soup. I was a military medic. 5 years ago, my entire unit got caught in an ambush. 23 people under my care. I couldn't save any of them. He sat across from her, his own bowl untouched. After that, I couldn't face going back. Couldn't face losing more people. So I came out here to empty space, where I wouldn't have to care about anyone. He looked at her directly. But when I found you dying in that pot, I had a choice. I could fly away and keep pretending I don't care. Or I could remember why I became a medic in the first place. To help people who need it, no matter who they are. Selira stared at the soup, her mind reeling. Your people allow this? This, caring for strangers? Allow it? Trevor almost smiled. We encourage it. Humans believe everyone deserves a chance. We don't care about castes or bloodlines or whether someone was born in the right family. We care about who you are and what you do. This was too much to process. Selira's entire world had been built on the foundation of order and hierarchy. The idea that a society could function without these things seemed impossible. Your civilization must be chaos. Sometimes. Trevor started eating his soup. But it's our chaos. And we wouldn't trade it. Over the next several days, Selira's strength returned. She couldn't simply sit and recover while the human worked. It went against everything in her nature, even if that nature had been declared defective. She began helping Trevor with repairs to his ship. The salvage work had damaged several systems, and 2 working hands made the job easier. Trevor showed her the engine room, explaining how the faster-than-light drive worked. Selira understood the concepts quickly. She had been trained as an engineer in her old life before exile. On Kethran, she would never have been allowed to work alongside someone of Trevor's lower status. But here, in this small ship, he treated her as an equal. Hand me that plasma torch, Trevor said, his head buried in an access panel. Selira found the tool and passed it to him. In Kethran society, I would never touch the same tools as someone of your rank. What rank? Trevor's voice echoed from inside the panel. You are a salvage worker. Low status. I was born to the administrative caste. I would have commanded others of your position. Trevor pulled himself out of the panel, grease smeared across his forehead. Well, out here we're just 2 people fixing a ship. Your fancy bloodline doesn't make you better at tightening bolts. The statement should have been insulting. Instead, Selira found it strangely liberating. For the first time in her life, she was being judged purely on her skills and actions. Not on who her family was or what caste marked her at birth. Trevor tried to reconnect a power coupling and swore when it sparked. He yanked his hand back, shaking his burned fingers. Every single time. I always forget that one stays hot. Selira examined the coupling. You need to discharge the capacitor first. Here. She made the adjustment, and the coupling connected smoothly. See? That's useful. That's what matters. Trevor grinned at her. Not whether your great-grandfather was important. That evening, Trevor attempted to cook dinner. Selira watched with fascination as he combined ingredients with complete confidence despite having no apparent skill. The result was something that smelled strange and looked worse. Trevor stared at the smoking pan. I think I killed it. Killed what? The food. I'm pretty sure food isn't supposed to look like that. He poked at it with a utensil. My grandmother would be so disappointed. Selira felt something strange building in her chest. A lightness she had never experienced. Trevor looked so serious, examining his culinary disaster as if it were a complex engineering problem. The absurdity of it struck her suddenly. She laughed. The sound startled her as much as it did Trevor. Laughter was not something Kethran did often. It suggested a lack of control, an unseemly loss of dignity. But Selira couldn't stop. The tension of the past weeks, the fear and pain and confusion, came pouring out in waves of laughter. Trevor started laughing too, and they stood there in the small kitchen of the salvage ship, 2 beings from different worlds, laughing at burned food. Selira realized with sudden clarity that this moment, this simple shared joy, would have been impossible in her old life. The Kethran had called her defective for caring about others. But maybe she thought they had been wrong about what defective meant. The alarm screamed through Trevor's ship, shattering the peaceful morning cycle. Selira dropped the wrench she'd been holding, her heart hammering against her ribs. Trevor was already sprinting toward the cockpit before she could react. She followed, her legs still weak but moving faster than they had in weeks. Trevor threw himself into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying across the controls. 3 ships appeared on the display screen, sleek and deadly. Selira's blood turned to ice. She recognized those designs. Kethran Purification Fleet vessels. They had found her. Get in the co-pilot seat and strap in, Trevor said, his voice tight with tension. They're here for me. Selira's voice came out as a whisper. You should surrender me now. Before they destroy your ship. Not happening. Trevor's hands never stopped moving across the controls. Hold on. The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in Kethran, cold and formal. Selira translated automatically, her voice shaking. They demand you power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. They say you are harboring contaminated property that must be returned for final purification. Trevor's jaw clenched. Tell them you're a member of my crew under human salvage rights. You're under my protection. That won't work. I am Kethran. Their law supersedes yours. Tell them anyway. Selira spoke into the communication system, her words formal and precise. She explained Trevor's position even though she knew it was useless. The Kethran response came quickly and she translated again. Commander Thexel says you are ignorant of proper law. I am marked for exile and death. No outside authority can claim me. He demands immediate surrender. Trevor opened a channel directly. His translator would mangle his words, but he spoke clearly anyway. This is Trevor Walsh of the independent salvage vessel Morning Star. The person you're looking for is a member of my crew. She's under human protection. I suggest you back off before this becomes a diplomatic incident. There was a long pause. Then Commander Thexel's voice came through, this time in broken but understandable galactic standard. You are human. Your species barely understands space travel. You dare to lecture us on law? The confusion in his tone was evident. Why do you protect defective property? This makes no sense. She is contaminated. Worthless. We marked her ourselves. She's not property. She's a person. And humans don't hand over people to be executed. You would risk war for this? Thexel sounded genuinely bewildered. She is not even your species. She questioned the natural order. She is mentally defective. We are doing you a favor by removing her. Trevor's knuckles were white on the controls. The only favor you can do is leave my ship alone. We cannot do that. She must be purified. It is our law and our duty. Thexel's voice hardened. You have 1 minute to surrender her, or we will board your vessel by force. Selira grabbed Trevor's arm. Please, let me go. Your life is worth more than mine. I'm already dead in the eyes of my people. There is no point in both of us dying. Trevor looked at her, and Selira saw something in his eyes that she still didn't fully understand. Determination, stubbornness, and something else. Something that looked like the compassion that had gotten her exiled in the first place. Strap in tight, Trevor said. This is going to be rough. He didn't wait for the minute to expire. His hands flew across the controls, redirecting all available power to the engines. The ship lurched forward, accelerating hard. Selira was slammed back into her seat as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. What are you doing? She gasped. Getting us out of here. Trevor's eyes were locked on the display. The 3 Kethran ships moved to intercept, their weapons charging. I'm going to jump to FTL. But this ship isn't designed for combat jumps. It's going to hurt. You'll destroy the ship. The calculations alone. I'm really good at bad decisions. Trevor's fingers danced across the navigation computer, entering coordinates faster than Selira thought possible. Hold on. The Kethran ships fired. Energy beams cut through space, barely missing Trevor's ship. Alarms screamed as the shields absorbed glancing blows. Trevor pushed the engines harder, racing toward the minimum safe distance for an FTL jump. Selira watched the Kethran vessels closing in, their weapons charging for another volley. Commander Thexel's voice came over the communication system, angry now. You cannot escape. Your ship is inferior. Surrender the contaminated one now and you will be allowed to live. Trevor didn't respond. He was counting down under his breath, watching the distance calculation scroll across his screen. The Kethran ships fired again. This time the impact wasn't glancing. The ship shuddered violently as the shields buckled. Sparks exploded from a control panel behind them. Now. Trevor slammed his hand down on the FTL activation. The universe twisted. Selira felt every cell in her body scream in protest as the ship tore itself into faster-than-light speed from far too close to the Kethran vessels. The inertial dampeners failed completely for 3 horrible seconds. Selira's vision went black at the edges. She heard metal screaming, systems overloading, Trevor's voice swearing in words the translator couldn't process. Then they were through. The ship dropped back into normal space and every alarm in the cockpit was blaring. Smoke poured from damaged systems. The lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency lighting. Trevor slumped in his seat, breathing hard. We made it. Selira looked at the damage reports scrolling across the failing screens. Your FTL drive is destroyed. Life support is failing. And the hull has 3 breaches that the emergency seals are barely holding. But we made it. Trevor pulled himself upright and started shutting down non-essential systems to preserve power. There's a human station called New Providence about 2 days from here at sublight speed. We can limp there if we're careful. They will follow us. Selira's voice was hollow. Commander Thexel will not stop. He cannot return to Kethran space without completing the purification. It would dishonor him. Then we better hope we reach New Providence before he catches up. Trevor turned to look at her, his face serious in the emergency lighting. I'm not giving you up, Selira. Get that through your head. Why? The question burst from her, frustrated and desperate. Why would you sacrifice your ship, your life, everything for someone who is already condemned? I don't understand your species. I don't understand you. In Kethran society, the individual is nothing. The order is everything. What you're doing makes no sense. Trevor was quiet for a moment, working to reroute power around the damaged systems. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. Humans have a saying. We don't leave people behind. It doesn't matter if it's logical or safe or smart. When someone needs help, we help. Even if it costs us everything. That's madness. Maybe. Trevor managed a tired smile. But it's our madness. And I'd rather be mad and alive with a clear conscience than safe and haunted by leaving you to die. Selira looked at this human who had turned his entire life upside down for her. Who had destroyed his ship, risked war, sacrificed everything for someone his species had no reason to care about. The Kethran had called her defective for showing compassion to those beneath her station. But maybe the real defect was in a society that called compassion a weakness. The ship limped through space toward New Providence Station, damaged and dying, while somewhere behind them, Commander Thexel and his purification fleet calculated their pursuit vector. Selira sat in the darkened cockpit and tried to understand what it meant to be worth saving. Trevor's ship barely made it to New Providence Station. The life support had failed twice during the 2-day journey, and they'd spent 6 terrifying hours in emergency suits breathing recycled air. When the massive station finally appeared on their failing sensors, Selira felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Oh. Trevor's hands shook as he activated the emergency channel. New Providence Station, this is salvage vessel Morning Star. We have critical hull damage, no FTL capability, and Kethran purification fleet in pursuit. Requesting immediate emergency docking. The response came quickly, a woman's voice calm and professional. Morning Star, this is Commander Laura Mitchell, Station Defense Coordinator. We're reading your damage. Transmitting docking coordinates to Bay 7. Medical teams are standing by. Commander, you need to know what you're getting into. Trevor glanced at Selira. I'm harboring a Kethran exile. Her people want her back for execution. They're probably a few hours behind us. There was a pause. Then Commander Mitchell spoke again, her voice unchanged. Then I suggest you dock quickly so we can prepare a proper welcome for your guests. Bay 7, Mr. Walsh. Now. The docking procedure took 20 agonizing minutes. Trevor's maneuvering thrusters kept failing, forcing him to use emergency bursts from the main engines. When they finally locked into the docking clamps, both he and Selira slumped in their seats with exhaustion. The airlock cycled open and a team of humans rushed in. Selira tensed, but they moved past her to Trevor, checking him for injuries. A woman with dark skin and gray-streaked hair stepped forward. She wore a military uniform decorated with rank insignia. Commander Mitchell, she introduced herself, extending her hand to Trevor in the human greeting gesture. Then she turned to Selira and did the same. You must be the person causing all this excitement. Selira stared at the offered hand, unsure what to do. Trevor reached over and gently guided her hand into the commander's. It's a greeting. Shows respect and trust. Welcome to New Providence Station, Commander Mitchell said. Let's get you both to medical, and then we need to talk about what happens when your friends arrive. 2 hours later, Selira stood in the station's command center, watching the display screens with growing dread. 3 Kethran ships had dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system. They were moving slowly toward the station, their weapons powered but not yet charged. A show of force but not yet an act of war. Commander Mitchell stood with her arms crossed, studying the approaching vessels. Around her, station personnel worked at their consoles. Selira noticed something strange. Several of them kept glancing at her, not with fear or disgust, but with something that looked like concern. The communication system activated. Commander Thexel's face appeared on the screen, his features sharp and cold. New Providence Station. I am Commander Thexel of the Kethran Purification Fleet. You are harboring contaminated property that must be returned for final purification. Surrender the defective one, and we will depart peacefully. Commander Mitchell stepped forward. Commander Thexel. I'm Commander Laura Mitchell. The person you're referring to has requested asylum in human space. We don't recognize your authority to demand her return. She is Kethran. She is marked. Your recognition is irrelevant. Thexel's voice remained emotionless. We are prepared to use force if necessary. You're welcome to try. Mitchell's voice was steel. But attacking a civilian station full of non-combatants would be an act of war against the human coalition. Are you prepared to start an interstellar war over one person? Thexel was silent for a moment. You do not understand. She is contaminated. Defective. She showed compassion to lower caste. This is a mental disease that threatens our social order. We are doing what is necessary to maintain purity. A younger human at one of the consoles spoke up without thinking. She's being executed for being nice? That's insane. Thexel turned his cold gaze toward the speaker. Your primitive culture cannot understand the necessity of order. Compassion without hierarchy creates chaos. She must be purified. More voices rose from around the command center. She deserves a trial at least. You can't kill someone for caring about people. This is murder, not justice. Selira watched in amazement as the humans argued with the Kethran commander, their voices filled with genuine outrage on her behalf. These were strangers. They had known her for less than 3 hours. Yet they were willing to risk conflict to protect her. Commander Mitchell raised her hand for silence. Commander Thexel, you have your answer. The asylum request is granted. I suggest you withdraw before this situation escalates. We will not leave without the contaminated one. We will remain in position. You have 24 hours to reconsider before we take action. The screen went dark. Trevor, who had been standing quietly beside Selira, finally spoke. What happens now? Now we wait and prepare. Mitchell turned to her team. I want defensive systems at full readiness. Contact Coalition Command and explain the situation. And someone get our civilian population to the interior sections just in case. Selira felt the weight of hundreds of lives pressing down on her. All these people in danger because of her. Because she had questioned the Kethran way. Because one human had refused to let her die. Commander Mitchell. I should surrender myself. These people don't deserve to be threatened because of me. Mitchell turned to look at her fully. Do you want to die? The direct question caught Selira off guard. What I want is irrelevant. I am marked. My people have judged me. I didn't ask what your people think. I asked what you want. Selira's mind raced. No one had ever asked her that before. In Kethran's society, individual wants were meaningless. The collective order was all that mattered. But Trevor had shown her a different way. Humans who valued individual lives. Who fought for personal choice. I want to live, she whispered. Then you'll live. Mitchell's voice was firm. We'll figure out the rest. That evening, Selira sat alone in the quarters they'd assigned her, staring at the communication terminal. An idea had been forming in her mind, dangerous but necessary. She thought about what Trevor had said about humans not leaving people behind. About Commander Mitchell asking what she wanted. About the station personnel who had defended her to a Kethran commander without hesitation. She opened a channel and began recording. Her hands trembled as she spoke in Kethran, then repeated her words in Galactic Standard. My name is Selira. I was born to the administrative caste of Kethran. I was marked for exile because I questioned the treatment of lower castes. Because I showed compassion where it was forbidden. Because I believed that all Kethran, regardless of birth, deserved dignity. The words poured out of her, weeks of pain and fear and revelation. She spoke about the exile system. About how thousands of Kethran had been marked and cast out over the years for minor infractions. For showing mercy. For questioning authority. For displaying emotion. For failing to meet impossible standards of purity. I was left to die in an escape pod, she continued. I would have died alone and afraid, believing I deserved it. But a human found me. A stranger from a species we consider primitive. He saved my life knowing it would cost him everything. He saved me because humans believe every life has value. Because they don't abandon people in need. She paused, gathering her courage for what came next. If you are watching this, if you are Kethran who was exiled, who was marked and cast out and told you were worthless, you are not alone. And you are not defective. The system that marked us is what is broken. Selira transmitted the message on every open galactic channel she could access. Within an hour the responses began. Coded messages from across the galaxy. Kethran exiles who had been hiding in the shadows, believing they were alone. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. All of them marked, cast out, surviving in secret. Trevor found her staring at the flood of incoming messages, tears streaming down her face. "What did you do?" he asked softly. "I told the truth." Selira looked up at him. "You showed me that being defective according to a broken system is not the same as being wrong. Now they know they're not alone." Commander Mitchell appeared in the doorway. "Your broadcast is causing quite a stir. The Kethran government is scrambling. The galactic community is paying attention. And Commander Thexel just received orders to withdraw while his government deals with the diplomatic fallout." Selira stood slowly. "They're leaving? For now. Your people can't execute you publicly while the galaxy is watching them. You just made it too expensive politically." Mitchell smiled. "Welcome to human space, Selira. Where speaking truth might get you in trouble, but we'll stand with you anyway." 3 weeks after her broadcast, Selira stood in Commander Mitchell's office watching the news feed scroll across the display screens. The galactic community was in an uproar. Diplomatic channels buzzed with debates about the Kethran exile system. Several council members had called for investigations into the purification protocols. The Kethran government had withdrawn all their ships from non-Kethran space and sealed their borders, refusing to comment on the growing scandal. Commander Mitchell handed Selira a data pad. "These are asylum papers. Sign them, and you become a legal resident of New Providence Station with full citizenship rights in human space. You'll have the same protections as any human citizen." Selira took the pad with shaking hands. "Why would you give me this? I have brought you nothing but trouble. You brought us a story that needed to be told." Mitchell sat on the edge of her desk. "And you've helped us locate over 300 Kethran exiles hiding throughout the galaxy. That's 300 people who now know they have a place to go. I'd call that the opposite of trouble. The Kethran government will not forgive this. They will see human space as a threat. Let them." Mitchell's voice was calm. "We've been taking in refugees from broken systems for generations. It's what we do. One more angry government on the list doesn't change anything." Selira pressed her thumb to the data pad, completing the citizenship application. It felt surreal. 3 weeks ago she had been dying in an escape pod, convinced she was worthless. Now she was a citizen of a sprawling human station, with rights and protections she'd never had even in her birth society. A chime sounded at the door. Trevor walked in, looking uncomfortable in clean clothes instead of his usual oil-stained work gear. "Sorry I'm late. The repairs on the Morning Star took longer than expected." "Your ship is functional again?" Selira asked. "Barely. New FTL drive installed, hull patches holding, life support working most of the time." Trevor grinned. "She'll fly, which is all that matters. I'm planning to head out next week, start salvaging again." Something cold settled in Selira's stomach. Of course Trevor would leave. He had his own life, his own work. She had been a temporary complication, a problem to solve. Now that she was safe, he would return to his empty ship and empty space. She forced herself to keep her voice steady. "I understand. Thank you for everything you did for me." Trevor looked confused. "What are you talking about?" "You're leaving. Returning to your salvage work." "Yeah, and you're coming with me." Trevor said it like it was obvious. "I need an engineer and you're the best one I've found. Plus, someone needs to make sure I don't blow up the ship with my cooking." Selira stared at him. "You want me to join your crew?" "If you want to. I know it's not fancy. The ship is small, the work is hard, and the pay is terrible. But it's honest work and you'd be good at it." Trevor shifted his weight awkwardly. "Unless you want to stay here on the station. That would make sense too. More comfortable. Safer." "I want to go with you." The words came out before Selira could think about them. But they were true. The station was safe, but Trevor's ship felt like the first real home she'd ever had. Commander Mitchell smiled. "Well, that makes the paperwork easier. I'll register you as crew on the Morning Star. You'll still be based here at New Providence, but you'll have freedom to travel throughout human space." Over the next few days, other Kethran exiles began arriving at New Providence Station. They came in damaged ships and smuggled cargo holds in any way they could manage. Each one had seen Selira's broadcast and decided to risk everything for a chance at sanctuary. Selira spent her time helping them adjust. She understood their confusion, their fear, their inability to comprehend a society that didn't rank people by birth. She introduced them to humans who offered help without demanding payment. who showed them kindness without expecting submission, who treated them as equals even though they were refugees with nothing. A young Kethran named Kethran sat across from Selira in the station's refugee center, his exile marks still fresh and painful. I don't understand these humans. I've been here 3 days and at least 10 different people have offered to help me find work. They don't know me. They gain nothing from helping me. What do they want? They want you to succeed. Selira said the words with more confidence than she'd felt when Trevor first explained the same thing to her. Humans believe that when you help others, everyone benefits. They call it community. But the hierarchy. There isn't one. Not like ours. Selira leaned forward. Your skills matter here. Your character matters. Where you were born doesn't matter at all. It's terrifying at first. But it's also freedom. Kethran touched his exile marks just as Selira did when she was nervous. Do you think we can really build lives here? Among aliens who should see us as enemies? I think we already are. On the day before Trevor and Selira were scheduled to depart, they stood together in the observation deck watching ships come and go from the station. The view stretched out endlessly, stars scattered across the darkness like scattered diamonds. Are you sure about this? Trevor asked quietly. Life on a salvage ship is lonely, dangerous sometimes. Not what someone from an administrative caste is used to. I'm not from an administrative caste anymore. Selira touched the scars on her arm. These marks took away my old identity. I need to build a new one. Fair enough. Trevor was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what you said. About your people calling compassion a defect. About them exiling anyone who showed kindness. What about it? I think they had it backwards. Trevor turned to look at her. The defect wasn't in you. The defect was in a system so rigid and afraid that it had to exile anyone who showed basic decency. You weren't sick. Your society was. Selira felt tears prick her eyes. She'd started to believe this herself, but hearing Trevor say it made it feel real. Humans don't think like this, do they? You don't exile people for caring. We've done plenty of terrible things in our history. Trevor's voice was honest. But generally no. We don't punish people for being kind. We celebrate it. The people humans remember as heroes are usually the ones who helped others when no one else would. Like you did for me. I'm not a hero. I just did what felt right. Trevor smiled slightly. Humans are stubborn like that. We don't abandon people even when logic says we should. Even when it costs us. It's probably our biggest weakness and our greatest strength all mixed together. A ship passed by the observation window, its lights blinking in the darkness. Selira watched it go and thought about all the Kethran exiles scattered across the galaxy. Each one marked as defective. Each one believing they deserved their fate. Each one discovering, slowly, that maybe the marks on their skin didn't define their worth. Trevor, do you think the others will make it? The exiles still hiding out there. Some will. Some won't. But now they know there's a place for them if they want it. That's more than they had before. Trevor straightened up. Come on. We need to finish loading supplies if we're leaving tomorrow. And I need you to explain the new NAV computer to me one more time because I still don't understand half the controls. They walked together through the station corridors, past humans and aliens of a dozen species going about their daily lives. No one stared at Selira's scars. No one treated her as contaminated or defective. She was just another person, another member of the community. That night, Selira lay in her quarters and thought about everything that had changed. She had been abandoned by her people and left to die. She had been saved by a stranger who owed her nothing. She had found sanctuary among aliens who rejected the very concept that made her an exile. She had discovered that the traits her society called defects, compassion, questioning authority, caring about others, were exactly what humans valued most. The next morning, she boarded the Morning Star with Trevor, ready to begin her new life. As the ship pulled away from New Providence Station, Selira looked back at the massive structure floating against the stars. Somewhere inside, hundreds of Kethran exiles were learning what she had learned. That being different wasn't a defect. That showing compassion wasn't a weakness. That among humans, the things that made you an outcast elsewhere made you valuable. Trevor set course for their first salvage site, humming off-key as he worked the controls. Selira settled into the co-pilot seat and pulled up the engineering diagnostics, already noting 3 systems that needed adjustment. It wasn't the life she'd been born to. It wasn't what the Kethran had planned for her. It was better. It was hers. And for the first time in her life, Selira understood what it meant to be free.